We are live. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to episode 3 of our reality series. Today, we're going to be discussing GPT and large language models. And with me today, I have Grace Cocco, who is our Senior Director of Product here at Smartling, a seasoned tech professional with more than 10 years of experience. In her early career was spent as a product designer, and the role gave her a unique understanding of the design and the process of the user experience. So now Grace enjoys streamlining the localization process for businesses around the world through her work here at Smartling. So thanks for joining us, Grace.
Happy to be here.
And we have Olga Beregovaya, the VP of AI and Machine Translation at Smartling. Olga has over 20 years experience in language technology, neural language processing, machine learning, and global content transformation, and AI data development, and is passionate about growing businesses through driving change and innovation. So we welcome Olga here today as well. So if you all want to go ahead and drop in the chat where you're calling in from today, that's always fun to see. So personally, I am in Southern California, so go ahead and drop that in there. And also, while we get started, I am curious to know, we're gonna kick off with a few questions and a few polls today. So how many people here know what a large language model is? So go ahead and drop in the chat like yes or no, I know, I don't know. And that will give us an idea of kind of where everyone's experience level is today. Okay, so yes, not sure, maybe. Okay, cool. Okay, so it sounds like we have a mix here, which is great. And so I am going to launch a poll right now, which hopefully everyone can see. So as we start talking about large language models today, curious if you know which of these roles benefit the most from large language model deployment. So take a moment to weigh in on the poll. If you don't know, just take a guess. No wrong answers here. So go ahead and drop it in. Give just another moment. Okay, so Olga, what do you make of the results that came in through the poll?
Let me see. So what do we have? All of the above is the answer.
Oh, can you see if you scroll? You should be able to scroll to see the results.
Oh yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. If I'm looking at the results, it looks like all of the above is the consensus in the group.
Okay.
I violently agree with this, and I hope we'll be able to unpack it a little bit more as we go further into the conversation.
Great. And so since we have a mix here of people who do and don't know what large language models are, Olga, do you mind just giving us a brief overview and description of what they are?
Well, large language models, first things first, language models as such have been around for quite some time. And large language models have equally been around for quite some time. And transformer large language models have been around since what? Since 2017. So basically, we're talking about a language model that's trained on, well, billions and now even trillions of parameters and large volumes of text data, now actually also visual data, to be able to handle both natural language understanding and natural language generation tasks, and generate text, which is similar to human reasoning and human output. Now, I would say similar would probably be a keyword here, because the reasoning process behind LLMs is still different from how the human would reason.
Okay. And for those who are familiar with large language models, we're curious, just drop in the chat if you know which large language models are trained on the most parameters and the most data. So go ahead and drop that in. And in the meantime, we are going to jump into myth number 1, that generative AI is just Chat GPT. So Grace, over to you.
Great. So I'm sure a lot of us have been hearing a lot about ChatGPT over the past several months. So it's no surprise that there are some people that think ChatGPT is generative AI, which is not the case. So we're going to break that down a little bit. So let's start with the GPT side of things. GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, which is actually a type of large language model. And in this case, that language model is owned by a company called OpenAI. And OpenAI was actually the first company to introduce a GPT model about 5 years ago. And in fact, if it isn't already, GPT might be trademarked by OpenAI here very soon. So now that we know GPT is a large language model owned by OpenAI, let's talk about ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is another offering from OpenAI that sits on top of their GPT models. And ChatGPT was trained specifically for dialogue and conversation to make it easier for humans like us to interact with it. So again, we have GPT as the large language model, ChatGPT as the chatbot, and OpenAI as the owner and operator of that technology. So now that we know all of those things, let's get back to our myth here that generative AI is just ChatGPT. And what we know now is that GPT is one large language model. So I'm curious if you want to throw your guesses in the chat here, how many large language models actually exist? So we'll see what everyone thinks here. Any guesses? All right, so the real answer here is there are 152 and counting large language models just in the US. So that's a really big number. And for us to think that ChatGPT is the only option, when in fact it's a chatbot that sits on top of that model, is a huge myth. So that's something that we want to talk a little bit more about today.
Yeah, so Olga, I know over to you a little bit more on generative AI and how this impacts localization.
Okay, so maybe first I could touch on how many large language models are available to us and why we would consider looking at large language models outside of GPT. So talking about 152, we now have the suspects that are spoken most about, which would probably be the BART by Google. Then Anthropic is actually a big one, also given how much more you can actually do with the Anthropic model. And then, I mean, Facebook, obviously. And there are multiple, I mean, every day, if you just look at publications, it's very hard to even make an accurate statement in the world of large language models, unless you've checked the news of the day and seeing if a new large language model was actually released that day. Okay, but again, talking about GPT, the GPT family probably was, Kelsey, to your earlier point, were the first ones to the market publicly from the modern generation of generative AI and large language models. So a lot of assumptions and a lot of things that are happening in the industry that are impacting our localization process are generally based on the GPT family. So that's just first things first, to address the abundance of language models available to us. Like if we take Llama, for instance, it's open source, so it's available for people to deploy locally. And that also has impact on things that I'm going to say about localization. So again, we touched on which jobs will be impacted in the localization workflow, or rather in global content creation and transformation workflow by the introduction of LLMs. And the answer is really probably all of us, if we look at that. If we look at the most common applications of large language models in the localization workflow, we can pinpoint first source content optimization. So what does it mean? That means that on the buyer side, the collaboration between the log department and the stakeholders and the way they work together is changing dramatically. I mean, first and foremost, if we take it a step back, the world of technical writers and marketing asset creation changed equally dramatically. So here we go. Source content, I apologize for that. Source content optimization, then setting stylistic preferences for the targets. So that's, again, quality at the source is probably the concept that's becoming way more prominent now than it was before. And the whole concept of garbage in, garbage out. You can actually mitigate the garbage much better right now. So on the buyer side, I would say much more control on the part of the log department in terms of what actually makes it into the globalization pipeline. Then we go into the whole translator universe, and there is a huge discussion about what is the job of translator. And I love what I heard somebody say the other day, and that's the Microsoft term, translator becoming AI companion, or AI becoming translator companion, mutual companionship, where the translator is equally a part of prompt creation and setting up the stage for generating global content, and then the validator and the corrector of AI output. But otherwise, we can really go anywhere with this. If you look at the code, again, localization world, testing code and creating code, creating things like JSON templates, for instance, a lot of things that were manual tasks right now, if we go to the product dev, internationalization and globalization tasks, again, being tackled by the implementation of LLMs. Another huge area is the whole area of LQA. And I know that we've spoken about it earlier, and the industry is talking a lot about it. If you look, for instance, at Microsoft, again, quoting Microsoft Gamba project, you have tangible proof that large language models, if they can produce reasonable content, they can equally drive the automation of LQA process. So again, the world of the quality manager is changing dramatically. We know that an experiment was run about having, I think it was ChatGPT, playing the role of log PM, and successfully so. Now, again, what happens to the role of log PM? Does a log PM become more of a interpreter of the data and validator of AI decisions? I would say that's the case as well. And then there is UX design, right? And with multimodal LLMs like GPT-4, again, designing UX, interpreting images, and making UX design decisions, and again, product internationalization decisions. So all of the above is the answer I go with.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now let's move into myth number 2, that large language models will solve all of your problems without prior knowledge. And so I think, Olga, you kind of alluded to this previously, but if you want to share with us what exactly this means and what some of the constraints are here.
Okay, so maybe we could touch on the constraints. And actually here at Smartling, we have gathered quite a bit of empirical data of the constraints of deploying large language models. I don't want to, what is the right English? Rain on this party or rain on this parade? I don't want to say that we should not be deploying large language models, but I would say that we need to be very mindful of the constraints. So first things first, the models can still forget where the sentence started before the sentence ends. The model can hallucinate. And what we have observed is factual inaccuracies and completely irrelevant sentences created or completed by large language models. We actually, to the point of, we are considering adding, since MQM framework is dynamic, we're actually even considering adding a hallucination category for evaluating large language model output created or corrected by LLMs. So you have factual accuracy, then you have the whole point of cost. Again, that's something we've been playing with. True, you can send X number of tokens to an LLM like GPT-3 for a fraction of a cost. But then as you go further in, and as you need to generate more tokens input more tokens for your prompt and generate more tokens, then eventually the cost, even with GPT-4 already, is becoming a constraint. Then if I go there, we can spend the whole next hour talking about it. The whole point of SLAs and the whole point of data privacy and security and compliance with the local regulations, like we can cite GDPR as a full example. Can we adhere to our customer SLAs and saying confidently that invoking LLMs actually allows us to respect the same SLAs? So we have factual inaccuracy, possible hallucinations, often lack of awareness of what's happening in languages and realia of languages other than English. That's, again, imbalance in large language models, or at least state-of-the-art large language models, in terms of how much English language data they have versus foreign language data. So if we were to sum it up, cultural relevancy, hallucination, factual inaccuracy, false fluency, which is actually not translator's best friend. If you have fluent, that's inherent, actually. That's very similar to the NMT world, but I would say that LLMs take it a level up. A post-editor, translator, human in the loop can easily be misled by a fluent and very confident sentence, which actually is not the sentence that they want to see. So there are a lot of, and maybe there is another thing we should say. The tagline for this section was "without prior knowledge." Prompt engineering is becoming an art. And as such, you really need to be able to play with a lot of parameters, like you take temperature, for instance, how much predictability and how deterministic you want your approach to be. So that's an eternal dilemma between like buy versus build. Do we really want, or do you really want to deploy data scientists in-house to be able to generate the right prompts and design the right prompts? So inputting, hey, make it sound like Oscar Wilde into the window is not necessarily solving your problem. So I think these are the things that I would call out.
Great. So I think, Olga, you did a great job of discussing all of the different constraints, and we know that Smartlink's doing a lot of the homework behind the scenes to solve for some of those problems and make some of those better. Do you want to dive into that a little bit more before I take over, or are we ready to jump into Smartlink Translate?
I think we can actually jump into Smartling Translate, and from there I can talk a little bit about what's happening behind the scenes. So maybe you show the what, and then I go a little bit into the how.
Great, that sounds good. So like Olga mentioned, there's a lot of constraints with the quality that you could get from these large language models without the high quality input. So Smartlink's doing a lot of work to improve those things behind the scenes. And one way that we're allowing all of you to take advantage of all of that hard work is through our recently released tool, Smartlink Translate. And I'm going to do a very quick demo here for you today. So the main goal of this feature is to give you a really simple, accessible way to access this really complex technology that is changing every day and that is new to everyone around the world. So with Smartlink Translate here, you can translate files and texts instantly. So the turnaround time is really, really low. There's low barrier to entry here, but most importantly, you can also take advantage of those large language models, in this case, GPT, to transform both your source and translation text. So we're going to run through a few examples here. So if I type in some source copy and type in some bad source copy here, and we'll maybe make a couple errors along the way. We have an option here with our AI features to correct the spelling and grammar. So some of the use cases for this, anyone who has been in the comment section of the internet knows that user-generated content, or UGC, is a total surprise what the quality level you're going to get is. So if you need to translate some of that content, it can be nice to smooth some of those mistakes over before you begin. So we'll go ahead and change the source content here. So can you send the documents we talked about to the marketing team? And this result, it has corrected the capitalization, spelling, grammar, and punctuation without us having to do anything about it. So let's start with this, and we'll start with, can you send the documents we talked about to the marketing team? And we have a good translation here on the Spanish side for this, but maybe we want to sound a little bit more formal. Maybe we're sending an email to a client, or just want to sound a little bit more professional. So we also have an option to make this text formal. And we'll click submit here. And all right, so a couple things to note here with the formality. So for those of you who are familiar with Spanish, we're definitely using the informal 2 version in this original translation. And in the new translation here, we're using the formal version of usted, which is great. And beyond that, we're actually changing the tone or formality throughout the entire sentence. So in case anyone on the call is not familiar with Spanish, we'll do a little back translation here just to see. We've updated the formality a bit. Could you please forward the documents we discussed to the marketing team? Added a little bit more of that professional edge here. And the next thing I'd like to show you is rephrasing this text. So maybe this isn't exactly how we wanted to sound. Maybe I have marketing copy that I'd like to have a different version of. So we also have an option to rephrase this sentence. So we'll give this another try. And what we'll get back is a sentence that maintains the original meaning and structure of the original text, but worded in a different way. So this is a great option, kind of the new era of transcreation here, to get a lot of different options for the text that you have. And this prevents you from regurgitating the same text across multiple RFPs or other things where you may want to mix up the language that you're using a little bit more. So two important things that I want to note here. Today, we are relying on GPT only for this AI feature, but not for long. Smartling is doing a lot of experimentation and exploration into those other 151 large language models that exist, and constantly working on ways that we can decrease the latency, the cost, the limitations on the sizes of requests that we can make. And we're really hoping to pass that benefit along to you. And we want Smartling Translate to be the doorway into AI for you and be able to take all of the hard work that we're doing behind the scenes and take advantage of it. So the second thing that I want to call out here is you'll notice that we have 4 predefined options here that take the guesswork out of what transformations you might want to do to your source or translated text. We're also exploring options to provide an open text field that could really give you the freedom to experiment and leverage all of these models with whatever scenarios you have. I know we had a comment in the chat here around changing specific words, which is something you could totally ask for a transformation for with that open option. So there are a lot more great things to come on the Smartling side for Smartling Translate and AI in general. So keep your eyes peeled for some great new features and functionality, and we're really excited to share them with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Grace. We have a few questions that have come in about Smartling Translate, so I think let's just answer some of those now. Laura asked, does Smartling Translate, does it save translated text or files to your existing TM?
Today, no, because this is machine translations. We typically don't like to save raw MT into a TM just to make sure that the TM is in good shape for repurposing. So today we don't have any kind of saving of the content to translation memory.
Okay. Mariam asked, is it possible to insert the Word document into the translation section, or should it be typed manually?
So that's a great question. So Word documents can be translated on the Translate Files tab. So we only looked at the Translate Text side of things today, but you can upload full documents and download completely translated files. We don't have options yet for any AI transformations on the file level, but today there's lots of opportunities on the text side for that.
Cool. And there's one more. Is there a character limit to the text box that you just shared?
There is a character limit. Today, the limit is 1,000 characters. So this is more for shorter sentences or short paragraphs, things like that to get started with. And then if you add longer content, there's always the file translation option for that.
Okay. And which engines does Smartling Translate use to translate?
Sure. So Smartling Translate is dependent on the configuration in your account. So you can have Smartling Translate use a specific engine that you pick, like Amazon Translate or DeepL, or an even better option is to use Smartling Auto Select, where Smartling will automatically choose which provider is the best for your content and locales that you're using. So you have options as far as which providers you'd like to use behind the scenes, and Smartling Translate is just a really simple UI for you to leverage that.
If I may add to this a little bit, Grace, we got a question the other day as to, will Smartling Translate honor our brand preferences and our brand terminology? And that's actually the argument that we got, like, hey, GPT recognized our brand name and did not translate it, but the generic translation engine will. And the answer to this is yes. There is a way for us to actually respect your brand tone and voice and your brand terminology as a part of the Smartling Translate experience. That's something that we're continuously evolving on, but even right now, the answer is a yes.
Great, thank you. And I see some people asking in the chat how you can access this feature. This feature is newly available. We just launched it this week. So you can either reach out to us after this event and we'll get you set up with your CSM, or reach out directly to your CSM and you can discuss how you can start using Smartling Translate. Cool. Okay, so I know we had a few more things just to kind of share some wrap up on our closing points. And then we have a couple more questions that we will get to. But Olga, I will let you just recap the takeaways and any final thoughts here.
Okay, great. So let me take it from here. So first of all, Smartling and our language AI technology and our language AI approach to global content transformation is based on years of us being state-of-the-art, top-of-the-line translation management system. So not only can you use the best in AI innovation, large language models included, it is a part of global ecosystem that Smartling brings to the table. So we make the use of it very, very easy for you. We have our connectors, right? We have our entire environment. We have our translation memories. Yes, we do not write machine translated output into it, but we can use translation memories as an example to inform our AI decisions. So that's first. Then, again, buy versus build. We have a team of data scientists and natural language processing engineers who are continuously experimenting, iterating, using the agile fail fast approach and delivering outcomes behind the scenes. And I think that's the main difference between, a lot of times I would see like, hey, let's just plug in large language model and like an equivalent of NMT, upload and pray. Or there is actually a team that will design the most optimal process for you. And we are constantly, again, there is a difference between a simple prompt and somebody who actually designs something for your complex specific use case. So it's not just plug and play. We actually will be your global content partners, and we will help you design your end-to-end content AI strategy. So that's my summary, Kelsey.
Great. Thank you so much. It looks like we had one question in the chat regarding ChatGPT. So Olga, I think this is a question for you. Do you know if ChatGPT for non-English languages partly translate English generated content?
Let me see if I understand the question correctly. Hold on, let me see. So do you mind repeating the question? I apologize. I just want to make sure I understand it. So ChatGPT
Yes.
for other languages, is it, if you could just finish that question.
Asking, does ChatGPT for non-English languages partly translate English generated content?
Well, if I'm answering the right question, generating source copy and then transforming it into the target copy is one of the pretty standard applications of ChatGPT right now. So I would say my answer would be a yes. It would equally translate machine-generated content and human-generated content. So I think my answer to this is a yes, again, if I'm answering the right question. What the problem there is, though, as I said, often the phenomena of the target geo might not be reflected. So it can be a very fluent target language copy, yet reflecting the phenomena of the source language.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question really quickly, our final minute here. Olga mentioned the risks of fulfilling, the risks of relying on MT. Do you expect those risks to decrease as AI gets more sophisticated?
That's a fantastic question. So what we see happen is, yes, large language models often perform translation tasks well. And we know that there's been benchmarking and our internal benchmarking showing that LLMs can actually generate copy, which is on par to machine translation. However, where we've seen LLMs shine is automated post-editing and improvement of machine translated output. So you let NMT do what it's good at, and the whole customizability is still much higher with NMT than it is with LLMs. But then using LLMs for smoothing, you mitigate the risks of grammatical inaccuracy, morphological inconsistencies, and so forth. So I would say combining the best of two worlds is indeed the way for us to mitigate potential issues. Actually, one thing we're very, very passionate about here at Smartling is mitigating biases. There are still inherent biases that can be generated by machine translation. And what we're working on as well is making sure that there is a facility to mitigate things like gender and other cultural biases.
Great. Thank you so much. And that is all we have time for today. So I just shared in the chat, episode 4 is going to be on July 19th. So you can follow the link in the chat to register for that. And on June 14th, we have our annual Global Ready conference, which I will drop a link to as well. So we hope to see you there, and hope you enjoyed today's session. We will send out the recording afterwards. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.